and the state would not force the Fertilizer Control Board to grant them a fertilizer exemption. Of course, why did the judge do that? He stated on page 4 of his preliminary injunction why he didn't issue a temporary restraining order. Denali has no likelihood of succeeding on the merits that is entitled to a fertilizer license and allows it to pollute, because this is not the intent of the fertilizer control law. Moreover, a license is required to sell fertilizer, but Denali is not selling the industrial processed wastewater that collects and land applies. On page 5, Judge Cotton continues, allowing Denali to continue to act under the cover of a fertilizer license in a manner that avoids regulations is clearly not in the best interest of the public. Well, I want to make sure I go on record here. I am not against proper land application of sludge or other waste products. Some of them are nutrient rich and useful. Obviously, the application of manure for fertilizer is a long accepted practice, and that is not what this is about. That doesn't have anything to do with this, okay? What this has to do with is closing a loophole to make sure that everybody has to get a proper permit if they're going to land apply or store sludge and then land apply sludge. There are in these waste basins, and there are 4 that I know of, 2 down in the representative from McDonald County in his district, and 2 up in my districts, 1 in Randolph, 1 in Macon County. And those, the 15 million, 3 of them hold 15 million gallon, 1 of them holds 10 million gallon. In one of those locations, up to 60 different companies are on their permit application are cited as to being able to have and almost half of the overall companies that dump that their waste is put in these companies are coming from out of state. So I just want to explain the parts of the bill to help you understand that. I know that time is essence, and you guys are quick over here. I know that, but if you have the copy of the House Committee substitute and it's perfected, how it was perfected on the floor, there are a couple of definitions up here at the front for agrochemical facility and for operating location. Those 2 things, and I think you can read those. But I want to skip over to there's section 2. If you will, on page 4, section 6 on page 6, and section 7 and 8 on page 6. So if you look at page 6 first, section 6, it says, notwithstanding any provision of this section, to the contrary, the commission may exempt an entity from the requirement to obtain a permit under this section based on the licensure from the Missouri fertilizer law. So this is that section that deals with the closing the loophole. Only if the entity is producing products that are commercially sold, right? If they're producing commercially sold fertilizer, no problem. To an end user in accordance with such sections that has accurate labeling, so each container has to include the information required under subsection 1 of section 266.321. That is the Fertilizer Control Board's section that tells what, when you buy a bag of fertilizer, you buy a container of fertilizer, it tells you what's in it, how much P and K are in it, and what it can be used for. All right, so in bulk fertilizers, it goes on and says entities storing combined fertilizer in storage basins shall not be exempt from any design requirements for agrochemical facilities. So if you're storing bulk fertilizers, you have to have the same rules as everybody else does. Okay, so we're just trying to close the loophole, make sure that if you're going to try to claim, you can't use a Fertilizer Control Board permit to exempt yourself from all the rules unless you're actually selling fertilizer, all right, and not wastewater. Okay, so then if we go to the basins are on section page 2, not page 2, section 2, page 4. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the land application, my bad. Section 8, in order to receive an operating permit on this, section 8 on page 6 and 1 and 2, it talks about the design requirements for a basin. Obviously, we have to store waste water from things all the time, and if Tyson wants to go out and get to make a basin, they have to go to the DNR and say, okay, here's our basin. This is what our design, this is what we're doing. They say, well, this is the permit. You have to have a liner. You have to have it so deep. You have to have it so wide. You have to have so many setback. You have to have such a big berm around it. All of those things are required by permit. But if you skip that process, then we don't have that regulation. So that's what Section 8 there, Sections 1 and 2 do. And then it talks about setbacks for the size of containers. If it's 500,000 gallons, 5 million gallons, or 10 million gallons, what the setback is for each one of those. Section 3 says all commingled off-site, and this is a mouthful, a lot of adjectives, because we are trying to carefully close the loophole for what we're talking about here. All commingled off-site industrial wastewater or wastewater residuals, open storage basins, or open storage vessels holding valid operating permits. So we're trying to narrowly define it. We're not pulling in other entities that are already regulated. These are for anybody that's trying to avoid the regulation, which are commingled off-site waste basins, open storage basins, using wastewater residuals, right? That's all that we're aimed at, not aimed at anybody else. And any other application is a red herring or something that doesn't apply, okay? So it talks about number 4, the department can, in places where, according to the Geologic Survey, it's water sensitive, that there's a place where things could get in the water, then they can have monitoring wells around the site to make sure that the stuff is not getting out into other waters of Missouri. Section 5 then talks about, sampling requirements. It has to be, you can't sample yourself. You have to have a state or other entity monitoring or, testing your materials. And I know I have in here, and some people say, I think I have in here at least monthly. It doesn't mean it can't be more than that. Okay, that was just a minimum requirement. I'm not saying that's what the requirement will be. It could be much higher than that, but at least monthly, not once a year, which was, what was, going on before. It tells a thing, and I tried to eliminate, bring these down to just those things that were most likely to be a problem: arsenic, aluminum, barium, most of your heavy metals, which we test for. We're just prescribing here what's already done, okay? Just prescribing what should already be done, nothing new. Pathogens that we'd already would go for: E. coli, fecal coliform, salmonella, things that we'd already test for. We're not adding anything that wouldn't already be part of it. It's just prescribing, because we want to make sure that we're somewhat prescriptive in this case. And so that's for the basin. Talks about setbacks, talks about what, testing, talks about, the design requirements, and then land application. Land application is in Section 2. Wouldn't it be nice if it had been in order? But it isn't. That's just the way it is because of the way statute's written. But when you're land applying, any industrial wastewater or industrial wastewater treatment sludge and related process, excluding, and so I'm not trying to get into CAFOs. I'm not talking about CAFOs. They've already got even more stringent requirements than what we're talking about here. Not talking about CAFOs. Not talking about livestock markets. Not talking about animal manure. Right? Those things are excluded. We're only homing in on this one entity that's trying to avoid regulation. Okay, so shall be subject to a nutrient management technical standard, which, if you're in the industry, everybody understands what that is, but not everyone necessarily does here. So a nutrient management technical standard is a standard that says, okay, if we're going to land apply this on, do you have a question?
I want to know where you're reading from.
Oh, I'm sorry. Page 4, bottom of page 4, Section 2, the bold print. At least that's what it is on mine. I'm assuming it looks the same as yours. Sorry, Senator Black. Sorry. So shall be subject to a nutrient management technical standard established and incorporated into rule by the department. I'm not going to try to prescribe I didn't think I could in here in statute try to prescribe that, because there's all kinds of things, the composition of the soil, what soil nutrients they need. It's going to be different for every type of soil. And that's always true. If you're going to plan to apply it, you got to know what you're applying it on and what you have that you're going to apply it, so that you don't over apply or under apply. You want to make sure that you have the right stuff. And I'm not trying to do that, but the land application practices, whether you drill it or topical apply it, setbacks, sampling requirements, that I'm leaving up to the Department of Natural Resources to prescribe those standards. They had already started writing the standard when the lawsuits occurred, and at that point they've stopped. As far as I understand, the DNR has stopped doing that. If we put this into law and the lawsuit goes away, they will continue to do that, and hopefully getting the permit process and get if businesses are going to operate, then they'll know what the rules are and they'll follow the rules, and we'll all be happier because of it. With that, I will take any questions from the committee.
Tell you what, before we do questions, Representative Deaton, do you want to have anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. Members of the committee, good to see you this morning. And so our legislation was combined. So my House Bill, it's House Bill 1956, combined in committee with the Representative Lewis's bill, House Bill 2134. Representative Lewis did a fine job. I'll just try to distill it very simply. There's really two issues here that the legislation addresses. You have just land application of wastewater, sludge, wastewater is what we're talking about. You have land application that has been an issue in this state, and for as long as, in my district, for as long as I've been elected, 6 years now. Then you have the storage basin, the commingling of the wastewater materials in these basins that has been problematic in some areas. The basins, to my knowledge, have only been utilized by, of these, of course, in municipal context for our poultry producers and other meat packers. They have on-site basins. They're licensed or permitted by DNR for their treatment facilities. We're not talking about that. We're talking off-site, commingled basins used by waste disposal companies for just their operations, logistics, makes sense to them. There's only one of those. I could be wrong. There's only one of those companies within that industry that I'm aware of that has utilized these 15 million gallon earthen basins, and there could be others. That's all that I'm aware of, certainly all that have been at issue. And so the land application portion here just proscribes, and I'm going to be very clear again with my legislation, I don't think Representative Lewis's bill either. This is an industry we need. We're not trying to put anybody out of business here. I don't believe this legislation does this. That's certainly not the intent, but it is to ensure that there is a minimum regulatory framework. You look at what the legislation does regarding to basins, it's very similar to what's required for a basin if it is on a wastewater treatment plant, or like at one of our poultry producers if they're going to do a basin, or similar regulations to CAFO. You've got an industry that if they're opposing this bill, or anybody that's opposing this bill, is saying for wastewater materials, we want regulations less than what is actual agriculture, CAFOs, and our producers. And essentially we want no regulation. On the land application side, it's a minimum regulatory framework, 644, which is the Clean Water Law. To apply wastewater, it has to be permitted by the Clean Water Law, except there's exemptions in the Clean Water Law. And why'd we do this? I don't know. Why did our predecessors do this? There's exemptions delineated if you look in 644. The last exemption, any other exemption as promulgated by the department, may be too broad. I don't know if we should have done that. Maybe we should look at that. The department's promulgated an exemption in their CSR that says any biosolid sludge process waste that holds a fertilizer permit is exempt from 644. And that's used to be true before July 1 of last year, when the Fertilizer Control Board had issued fertilizer permits for wastewater material. They since looked at it and examined and said, we don't believe this is fertilizer under the fertilizer law, which has put it in DNR's lap. This ensures that continues to be the case, that they continue to have to permit it. There is pending litigation that if it goes a particular way, if this legislation doesn't pass, they would hold fertilizer permits again, and they would be exempt from 644, which means there would be no regulation of land application. You could pour wastewater material, over apply it onto, it could run off onto the neighbor's place. You could pour it right next to a well, right next to a fence row, in the rain, in the snow. No problem. No regulation. This ensures that there's that minimum regulatory framework, much like exists in every other state, and that's all that this legislation does, as far as I know. I appreciate the committee's indulgence and allowing me to say a few words, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Absolutely. Just a quick comment from a farmer standpoint. I mean, we soil sample on 2-acre grids. We vary to see what soil types we've got. We're buying guaranteed analysis. We're split applying. We're doing everything GPS. We're doing. We're cutting off our booms. We're doing a lot of stuff to make sure that we get exactly what we're supposed to be getting as a farmer, and that's very important to us, and that's what makes us good stewards of the land. So, with that, any questions for the witnesses or for the representative? Excuse me.
I just have a comment.
Senator Carter.
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank you for bringing this language forward. It's something that obviously Dirk Deaton and I share the same district, and this has been a grave concern to our area. So thank you so much for your careful stewardship of this issue.
Senator McCurry.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. Good to see you guys. Why do you think it is that Missouri has become like quite literally a dumping ground, especially for a company based in another state? Like, what is it about what's happening in Missouri that has made this situation realistic?
Well, I can only speak to this one specific thing. The Fertilizer Control Board exemption from regulation was, as I would call it, a loophole.
Okay.
That allowed, if you don't have any permitting or any regulation, obviously it's less expensive, right? If you have no permitting and no regulation, but it doesn't mean it's better, right? We need reasonable regulations, reasonable permits, so that we can. The ag groups all spoke in favor of this in the House. Every ag group spoke in favor of this.
They're
bill.
following the rules.
Yeah, because they want to follow the rules. They don't want a black eye for the industry. It's not good when someone sees someone spreading stuff and causing a problem in their community, and they're like, "Oh, well, that's just the ag groups doing that." No, it's not. It's somebody not following a permitted, some permitted instructions that we've already got delineated in statute. But you're avoiding those by going through a loophole. So I wouldn't say that the whole state of Missouri is becoming a dumping ground. I wouldn't characterize it that way. And I know that our ag industry wants to protect the land. What we see here is one loophole that has been legally exploited. It's been legally exploited, and we think, but that just needs to be cut off, because that's not a loophole that we want to exist. Everyone should be permitted and follow the same rules.
Okay. Well, and what I see as somebody viewing this is there doesn't seem to be a way for local control, for local people directly impacted by it to weigh in. And I'm glad I see a lot of just normal, regular citizens out here today, so I look forward to hearing from them.
Yeah,
So
and that's
thanks.
one thing. When you have a permitting process, there's a time for public
Right.
testimony. And without a permitting process, there isn't, and then all of a sudden you have a basin, and you're like, oh, where'd that come from, and why is it there? And that's actually what happened in my county.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Can I get a quick show of hands? How many are here to testify in favor of these bills? How many are here to testify not in favor? I just asked, we have a lot of people to come testify. Just please be respectful of everybody's time. Try not to repeat any testimony. So first up, in favor, please come forward. In favor.
Good morning. Morning, members, committees, Chairman Bean. Pleasure to be here. My name is Steve Taylor. I'm the program director for the Missouri Fertilizer Control Board, and I'm here to testify in favor of this legislation. The Fertilizer Control Board is granted the authority to exercise general supervision and administration of Missouri fertilizer law. The mission of the board basically is consumer protection, truth in labeling for fertilizer that you buy. Specifically, the board ensures that fertilizer customers are getting what they're paid for. The program policies and regulations of the board have been implemented over the last few years to help business with compliance, less misbranded fertilizer, and more farmers and consumers getting the fertilizer that they bought. This legislation changes Missouri water law such that the Clean Water Commission may provide entities an exemption from DNR no discharge permits requirements only if a permit from the Fertilizer Board is obtained and only if the entity is producing a product that is commercially sold. As Representative Lewis mentioned, this past July, the Fertilizer Board was sued in court by Denali. And the board was determined that when the board determined that Denali did not require a fertilizer permit for their wastewater product and that not being commercially sold as a fertilizer. And as Representative Lewis said, there was a hearing on a TRO, temporary restraining order, and the judge did not grant that TRO. However, the court proceedings continue. We have court dates scheduled, I believe, in April and June. And I will continue to be with the Attorney General's office as our legal counsel, and I'll continue on those proceedings in court. In this court case, the board contends that Denali seeks fertilizer permits for the purpose of being able to dispose of wastewater material through land application without having to obtain a no-discharge permit from DNR that would otherwise be required by the Clean Water Law. The board supports this legislation because it would close this loophole in the Missouri Clean Water Law that's been created by the CSR. I and other members of the board staff continues to communicate and coordinate with MDNR staff, Department of Natural Resources staff. My understanding this legislation would not hinder the great progress that's currently being made in preparing for MDNR to permit these companies through the Clean Water Law. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of House Bills 2134 and 1956. Please come forward.
That thing stuck. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the time that you've given us to be here. My name is Sammy Helm, and my family owns approximately 2,500 acres that is split between McDonald and Newton County, and partial some in northwest Arkansas. Approximately a year ago, we had a company that was distributing some of this material on a neighboring property, and they distributed on a slope so great that when it rained, it washed it down into a live spring and ran under the fence onto our property. So we called DNR. They came out, made several trips out with us to kind of inspect and make sure everything was going well. With cleanup, if you really want to call it that, we spent a lot of time surveying what had happened after the water receded. Two of the things that really caught my attention, I asked the DNR gentleman what the grit was that was still on the leaves in the sandstone that was left after the water receded and that stuff was open. He said, that's chicken bone. Now, it's against the law to feed bone and meat meal in the United States. I don't know what effect chicken bone could possibly have, but if a cow ingests that, I don't know. That was the thing that caught my attention the most. The other part of the problem that I saw was that the company that we were dealing with, I'm not sure was quite forthright with us in several of the conversations we had with them about the cleanup and a few other things that we expected. They did come in and clean up and kind of stir some stuff around and make some things disappear, so we were satisfied and we signed off on that. I'm not sure that, they gave it their best effort, but they did come out and do what they said they would do, so we were okay with that. part of our problem that we have with this particular application is, and to the lady's question she asked earlier about what would allow this to happen. So after all that, the company was fined $15,000 for this so-called mistake, plus the loophole that they were applying under. They just kind of realized that through some smart attorneys that were probably looking at this, they thought this is the place to go because they have the least amount of regulation and the smallest fines. I'm sure if you did this in Colorado, you'd probably get buried under the Colorado River. But anyway, we've been keeping up with this as much as possible because we don't necessarily have a problem with the poultry. It's not that at all. With the poultry industry that we have there in the county, it's very important for vitality, jobs, economy, all that stuff. My father actually worked for the predecessor to Simmons. He built the hatchery that Simmons operates in Jane, Missouri, and was actually oversaw the protein plant at Southwest City in the late 60s where some of this material came from. We know how that plant operates. The discharged water out of that plant has to meet specs, and Simmons built, I don't know how many $1 million facility to clean that water and discharge it out onto their property out behind their plant, and it runs down the low water stream, which Simmons owns. Where does this material come from? If that's the discharge off the plant, what is this that they're spreading, and where's it coming from? If it's coming from the Simmons plant, Tyson's, George's, IDF, any of those places, I don't understand what, this is the leftovers of the leftovers. So whether it's good or not, I don't know. We don't use it. I know a lot of our neighbors do. Some of them are happy with it. Some of them have not used it. After they used it once, you get kind of a mixed bag of responses to that. But the one most important thing for us that I feel like that everybody needs to probably understand is that they're bringing so many gallons of this stuff in from other places other than just our local poultry operations. They have to do something with it. There's very few people in the county that's letting them apply it. So over-application takes place. And it was pretty rampant for a long time. The neighbor right next to my house, they spread it right up against my fence, and it's supposed to have a 50-foot setback. I mean, you could go anywhere in the county and see where they're spreading this stuff, and they weren't following regulations at all. So we feel that it's very important for them to at least be brought under the heel somehow in some fashion, but we don't want the poultry industry to think that we're after them, because we're not. And I've heard some comments early on about, well, this is anti-ag. No, this is not anti-ag. I think this is actually protecting ag. So anyway, thank you.
Any questions for the witness? I'll say one thing real quick, talking about over-applying. So as a rice farmer, more nitrogen is better. We use about 147 units, and you go over that and the rice falls down and it's not that good. So,
Well, 60-030 is $5.25 a ton this year.
Yep.
And that'll put you 180 pounds per acre, get you 3 tons of hay. That's what we do. I don't know how they apply that to the stuff they're spreading. I don't know how they can tell us that. But I liken it to, if you can probably understand this, if you put liquid calcium on the ground, the plant absorbs it, but it does not augment the soil. It does not change the pH.
Right.
I think this stuff is the same manner. I don't think it changes the soil at all. I think because it's liquid, the plant immediately absorbs it, and it does one of two things. It either kills it or it turns it really green.
Mm-hmm.
But you have no soil augmentation and buildup of your soils and stuff off of this material that we've seen. But that's just from observation. We're not scientists, we're ranchers, so
thank you for your testimony.
thank you.
Next up, in favor. proceed.
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm going to try to get myself together here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is William Wymore, and I live in Gasconade County, Missouri. And I come before you in support of this legislation, creating new common sense provisions to the Clean Water Law, specifically promoting the testing requirements for industrial sludge, because no one's really testing it annually, is what we're being told. I believe this is a bipartisan issue, and I could spend all day going over reasons why I believe additional legislation is necessary from several different viewpoints. And by the way, if anybody ever needs filibuster material, I'd be happy to provide it. But out of respect for the committee's time, I'll try to keep it as brief and to the point as possible.
Thank you.
Missouri water's extremely important to everyone on both sides of the aisle. All of our drinking, agriculture, and industrial water comes from the same sources. My experience in the industry is that over the last several years, I've traveled across the country working with experts, speaking on water-related issues in other states as well as ours, with different stakeholders, including some of the largest food producers in the United States, in their wastewater treatment plants, as well as bringing together folks from scientists to conservationists, community leaders, local officials, to not only eliminate the environmental cost in the form of the degradation to our creeks, rivers, and streams that we're seeing all over the country, but also the unbelievable financial cost associated with this disposal. We have a podcast. I host a podcast called Good Morning Sludge Truck, where we specifically discuss ways to tackle American water and wastewater treatment issues. And thankfully, in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of industry leaders start to implement processes that eliminate this impact. I think we're at our best when we have an open dialogue and actively work together to find the best solutions that make sense for everyone. To a major food producer, the disposal of sludge represents a tremendous fixed cost, and it is a burden to the industry. They're paying tens of millions of dollars a year to disposal companies to get rid of it safely, to get rid of this material that they themselves cannot discard because of its toxicity. Well, how is it toxic? Let me give you a brief overview. A major poultry producer might utilize several million gallons a day in processes like cleaning, rinsing, and cooling, resulting in the generation of wastewater that contains these suspended solids, contaminants like blood and raw meat particles, bone, feathers, and then pollutants like excess nutrient loads. By the way, I've seen samples from some of these lagoons we're talking about, and it's thousands and thousands the times the reportable limit for phosphorus, nitrogen, ammonia. Those things are good, but as you were talking about, Chairman Bean, when they're in the right amounts. So some of this is many thousands of times what would meet the profile of safe discharge or even fertilizer. And so to ensure compliance with environmental regulations and to protect water quality, the wastewater undergoes mechanical and chemical treatment to remove these contaminants before the clean water can be discharged or used. The removed solids, along with any unwanted components that include the industrial chemicals, as well as other pollutants, constitute what makes up this material, this sludge. Because of the limited ability of the land to absorb this material and the limited number of farmers who are willing to accept it, and the volume at which it's produced and acquired from 60 to 100 different facilities, including out-of-state facilities, capacity issues developed, and the idea of these holding basins were born out of that. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Bernskader? Absolutely.
so I apologize if I missed it, but I think you said your name, but your occupation, your background,
Sure.
what do you do?
Sure. My name is William Wymore. I'm a pastor. That's my main occupation. I'm a fisher of men. But I work in the industry as a wastewater consultant. During the pandemic, I became very interested in our water supply. I have an agriculture background. I grew up on a farm. And so I spent the last 3 years really just studying and understanding this industry. And so I work in the capacity of trying to help promote technologies that would eliminate these problems. Meeting with everyone from scientists to spending long hours in these wastewater plants themselves.
You don't really have a formal background, it's just something you acquired over years.
Correct. Sure.
Please proceed.
Yes, sir. So, as a result of these wastewater lagoons, we're talking about 15 million gallons. This is a cocktail of chemical and biological reactions, and it waiting to take place. I grew up in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. I was the president of the FFA chapter. I'm very pro-agriculture. I understand the importance of fertilizer. There's no question that there's a lack of distinction between legitimate fertilizer and industrial wastewater sludge, and it's led to some conflation of those two things. Unlike traditional fertilizers, which are carefully formulated, as the chairman spoke about, to enhance soil fertility and promote plant growth, sludge is inconsistent. It contains contaminants, pathogens, and pollutants that you don't want in your well, you don't want in your swimming hole, and you certainly don't want grown into your crops. I'm also an outdoorsman. We're blessed to have some of the most pristine natural resources in the country, and I've seen what this rancid material does to fish, frogs, and other aquatic animals. It can create dead zones in our streams where nothing can survive. I certainly don't blame business for going as far as the law allows. Much like the water we're talking about, they tend to follow the path of least resistance when it comes to regulations, and quite frankly, for whatever reason, this hasn't been as regulated here as it has been in other states, such as our neighbors to the south, where one of these lagoons ruptured and created a tremendous issue in Arkansas, which contributed to why a lot of this material was coming into our state. I believe it's necessary to close these loopholes and rein in activities that have allowed out-of-state waste disposal companies to haul in millions of gallons of hazardous waste. And I say hazardous because if you look at the SDSs on these chemical coagulants that are used, by the way, in the tanker load, they're hazardous chemicals. If we dumped it on our field by itself, it would be a tremendous problem. We couldn't put it down a storm drain. We couldn't put it on a field. And so that's why we're dealing with these issues, and I believe that it's necessary to close loopholes and rein in activities that have allowed out-of-state disposal companies to haul millions of gallons of hazardous waste that they themselves charge millions of dollars to dispose of, but instead give it away to our farmers under the guise of nutrient-rich fertilizer. It is extremely nutrient-rich. It's too nutrient-rich, and there are a lot of other things in there as well. And in many instances, as it's been proven, this material runs off and enters waters of the states. We need a sensible guardrail here. I believe water is a bipartisan issue that should unify everyone. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Adam Rapert here, lobbyist for the Missouri Rural Crisis Center. I have written testimony here I want to submit on behalf of the Rural Crisis Center. I'm not going to say anything that the previous witness haven't said, but I do want to reiterate a point that Representative Lewis said, that we're not looking to negate some of the positive benefits that these products have for our farmers. What we want to do is we want to make sure that they're being land applied properly and safely and with the proper oversight. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor.
Good morning, Chairman Bean, members of the committee. My name is Melissa Vatterat. I'm the Policy Director at Missouri Coalition for the Environment. I want to thank the sponsors of this bill, everyone in the House who's voted to make this come to the Senate. This is a really critical, important issue that we need to address for the health of residents currently in Southwest Missouri. And at the same time, if we don't close loopholes, this could be facing other communities in our state. So I do want to say I'm in support of the bill. I want to give you some context after the 18 months that MCE has researched this issue and gotten to understand the regulations or lack of and the legislative loopholes that allowed companies like Denali to exist in our state as they are. So from our research, which includes reviewing sunshine request documents, we actually have found there are 3 loopholes. So this bill is doing something really great. It's closing one of those loopholes, but there's 2 other things that need to be addressed. So this bill changes the definition of agrochemical facility. It used to have this caveat at the end of it that said no more than 30 consecutive days, which meant, and Denali, we see this, I have seen with my own eyes, dialogue with DNR where Denali said, oh, we'll just operate for 29 days, shut down for a day, and then resume the following day. That should not happen. So I'm grateful that that has been removed in terms of what this bill language has so that we don't have companies just simply shut down for one day and then resume their operation. The other two have to do with the DNR operating permit exemption when a facility has the Missouri Fertilizer Control Board license, which has already been referenced earlier today, as well as a DNR exemption from the construction permit because DNR determined that Denali was handling a non-waste material. So I'm going to cover those briefly. I do have more here than I will speak to you about because I know we have a lot to go over. So regarding the need for addressing the fertilizer control law, the situation at hand has to do with the fact that FCB's authority, and I know that they are here, has to do with consumer awareness, transparency about what the content is in the material. FCB's authority, and this makes sense, so this is not a criticism to FCB. Fertilizer Control Board's authority does not relate to public health, water quality, air quality, or soil health. With regard to assessing the material's content, it only has the authority to attest the material's nutrient ratio of NPK and not to test for other pollutant contents. It was mentioned earlier by Representative Lewis that 60 businesses at some point have brought their materials to Denali in this example. There's all sorts of things that could be in there, way more than NPK. So it's really important that we make sure that DNR requires a permit. I know that we have that language. It's section 6. I can see it in my brain, but I don't know what page on the bill, okay? And it mentions that DNR may exempt if a company has the license from the FCB, only if it is commercially sold. I've spoken with individuals at DNR, and the concept of commercially sold does not have a particular standard. And I know that right now Denali is giving their material away, but there is nothing that would prevent them from selling it. And the point is, there is content in their material that is harmful, and FCB just certainly, it doesn't cover that issue. So I would urge that we not allow an option where maybe they can be exempt because they have the FCB license. And I'm happy to clarify that if anyone has questions at the end. The third thing that still needs to be addressed has to do with the construction permits. So let's see here. There is language about construction permits in the bill, and I do appreciate it. So no criticism on that. I'm so glad it's been addressed. I would like to offer that there's a current phrase in the bill that I think is difficult to understand, and MCE would propose a different term, as well as the phrase isn't currently defined, and that is the following: commingled off-site industrial wastewater and wastewater residuals, open storage basin or open storage vessels. We don't know how to describe Denali, okay? So I'm not criticizing. We've got to figure it out. But I think that if we could have a shorter phrase to be able to describe businesses like this, because it's not a CAFO, it's not, a chemical manufacturer, it's not a wastewater treatment plant, it's something different. We need to have a term to be able to describe it, and then it needs to be defined. So I have put in this testimony a proposed definition that is based on our review of sunshine request documents, and it includes everything that Denali has ever accepted, like the type of contents, okay? And if you don't like the term that I came up with, that's fine. I don't care what the term is, but I think it needs to be defined so that we make sure that businesses understand that these rules apply to them. Let's see here. Lastly, there are also some really important terms that are used in this bill. Great language. We're addressing a lot of really important pieces because, again, there's so many different waste streams that are going into this material. Unfortunately, many of those terms are not defined. The terms are domestic biosolids, domestic wastewater, process waste, and septage. I know that the average person might know, but I just don't want to see another company evade the law by claiming, well, what we have isn't that, okay? These definitions already exist in DNR regulations. So the point, though, is that the average person who reads the law won't know that it's defined in regulation, right? So I'm urging the committee to consider adding the definitions that we already have. They are already what DNR uses, but it would make sure there's transparency and clarity to anyone who's relying on this law. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Senator Carter?
So is the FCB license a concern with wastewater being put under DNR still? You were talking about the FCB.
They are here. They are happy to have their own license, and then the issue about having a permit does not. They're separate. They're separate issues.
Right.
Um,
Agreed.
okay.
Did I misunderstand that you had a concern with the FCB and the licensure in regard to the wastewater? Still
Yes, I
being
did have a concern. I can clarify that. The language currently in the bill says something like, and I apologize, I didn't print the bill. I should have printed the bill, but it says something like, the commission may exempt an entity from the operating permit if they have licensure under Missouri fertilizer law, only if the entity is commercially selling the product to an end user. ... I don't remember the rest.
So in general terms, your concern is if they started to sell the product, then it would be put underneath the fertilizer board. Is that
The commission could decide to not issue an operating permit. So the language right now is giving the commission discretion, and I'm arguing that we should not have discretion because there's so much more complexity to these types of facilities than just the product that they, like the label that FCB governs. Does that make sense?
Yes, I appreciate the clarity. And then just one more question.
Yes.
You're talking about referring, so you're suggesting we refer in this bill, the statutes that are currently defining wastewater and all of those other definitions. Is that correct?
They're not currently defined.
They're not currently in statute somewhere else?
They're in the regulation that DNR is currently using.
Okay.
And so I'm suggesting we use those same definitions. I did not find those definitions, at least in this chapter, currently defined.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, of
Appreciate
course.
it.
Any other questions for the witness? Thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 2134 and 1956.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tony Benz here representing the Missouri Agribusiness Association. We'd like to go on favor and support of this legislation. And currently, DNR's CSR does not define fertilizer products, and the CSR does not require the product to be commercially sold. MOAG supports this legislation because it helps close the loophole in the clean water law created by a CSR. MOAG advocates for agribusiness and this piece of legislation for agribusinesses, including animal agriculture, and expand and grow in an environment. We would like to help expand and grow in an environmentally safe manner all of agriculture. And we are not at all trying to end this practice. We do believe there is value in this practice. However, there needs to be some rules put in place that everybody's following the same rules and best practices and being a good neighbor. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor of the bills.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm John Bryan, Missouri Poultry Federation, and I represent Tyson, Simmons, George's, and Waterfall, all of our chicken and turkey companies. And we want to go on record as in support of this bill.
Any questions for the witness? I was going to ask you. Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How many of your businesses in the, I'll just say Joplin area, Southwest Missouri, were negatively affected by the Denali, the permit going away?
That I don't know. Denali, I might have those numbers.
I'll hold off and I'll ask you that question. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? You did fill out a witness form online, I'm assuming. All right, thank you. Next up, in favor.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jacob Knabel with the Missouri Corn Growers Association. Would like to go on the record in support of House Bills 2134 and 1956. The statement was already made earlier in previous testimony that they felt that this bill is not anti-agriculture, but instead protects agriculture, and I could not reiterate enough the importance of that statement. I can't stress enough how important these land application companies are for the processing and agricultural sectors. However, we feel that these efforts help ensure greater certainty and clarity regarding the regulation of these practices in Missouri in a responsible manner. We also feel that this bill helps to regain the public trust in these practices in the ag processing sector and will help ensure a long-term solution to the current issues that are being faced. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you all.
Next up in favor. Seeing none, not in favor of House Committee Substitute House Bill 2134, 1956, please come forward if you're not in favor.
Sit up, sorry.
Morning, Chairman Bean, committee members. My name is Rob Curry, and I'm the Chief Environmental Officer here at Denali. I'm in charge of our environmental and land application practices. Can you hear me okay? Am I speaking up enough?
Yeah, there's a green light on there.
Didn't feel like it was. That's a
There
little
you go.
better. I'll start again. Apologies.
Please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Bean, committee members. My name is Rob Curry. I'm the Chief Environmental Officer here at Denali. I'm in charge of our environmental compliance practices, and some of my colleagues are here in the room. My perspective at Denali is based on my background in agriculture. It shapes my perspective on agriculture in Missouri and beyond. I grew up on a farm in Michigan. I showed dairy cows in 4-H, and I'm proud to lead a company that works hard hand in hand with farmers across the U.S., including this state. And some of the farmers we work with in Missouri are here in the room. Denali is the largest recycler of organic materials in this country. If I can go off script for a minute, I'm excited to have the chance to combat some of the accusations that were made against our company. Hopefully from my testimony here, you'll learn about how we approach our business and how seriously we take it. And hopefully I can address some of the comments that were made about phrases that were used that I don't believe are true about the way we approach our business. So I aim to set the record straight with my testimony. We say that our work touches everyone who consumes food in the United States because we're involved throughout the food supply chain. Our purpose as a company is to replenish the earth by keeping nutrient-rich organic residuals in the agriculture and circular organic food stream in the United States and out of landfills and in our food and ag systems. In Missouri, we recycle organics for our customers, the list that the senator asked about. That's more than 20 food processing plants that employ over 11,000 people. I'm here to testify in opposition to the bill. I actually think that we are for common sense regulation. We are for transparency, testing. We are for answering the questions that have been asked by some of the folks in the room today. But we think that the bill as it's currently written will have unintended consequences for the agriculture industry in Missouri, and I'm happy to share the specifics of those either now or at a later date. We support updates to the regulations that have been mentioned, regulations on storage, regulations on land application, and we are willing to change our operations in according to those rules. There is zero desire in our company to not follow the rules, and I'll talk about how we do that in 20 states with nearly 1 billion gallons of this material every year. But the revisions in this bill are needed to prevent unnecessary red tape, to more effectively protect the environment. I have a suggestion on how we actually could do better than the language in the bill, and to ensure farmers and food producers will continue to thrive in Missouri without unintended consequences of the bill. So, as I mentioned, we handle a wide variety of organic materials across the country, and in every state, we're focused on complying with the rules and regulations. To suggest anything to the contrary is just flatly not true. Our excellent environmental record has allowed us to operate in Missouri for more than 25 years. We've been here doing this for 25 years, protecting fields, following the rules as they were in place at the time that we followed the rules that were given to us. And beyond Missouri, we are active in all 50 states and Puerto Rico. And as I mentioned, we handle 750 million gallons of this material a year. That's 125,000 semi-truckloads full. So we take our responsibility and our imperative to handle that material in a responsible manner very seriously. So I mentioned that our plants, our customers here handle and make materials like ice cream, beef, and chicken, which you are well aware. I mentioned the amount of people they employ, around 11,000. Those plants where we serve those customers make around 1 billion pounds of food a year. And if you think about that, feeding around 4 billion people, Missouri feeds the world. And we view ourselves, and our customers will say this, although they need us to do our job, as a vital part of the industry in the state. If we don't show up at those plants and haul away the organic residuals and recycle them on farmers' fields, they do have to shut down, or their costs go way up. So the sudden rule changes here in Missouri, and when I say sudden, I'm just referencing we've been active for 25 years. For those 25 years, we paid our fertilizer tax to the Missouri Control Board. This is often left out of the record, dutifully, to the tune of millions of dollars, as we were regulated as fertilizer across those 25 years. And suddenly the rules changed last year. That's what we were concerned about. And what the rule changes did is they forced organics recyclers like us to be in a difficult position. The changes have increased costs and uncertainty because we don't know what the future looks like. So we are for common sense and transparent regulation moving forward so we all can have certainty. And we think that the bill needs to change pertaining to more specific guidelines for the department to regulate the activities moving forward because it's currently too broad and we worry about red tape and increasing costs. So just a few more comments and then I'll conclude. It's not addressed specifically in the bill, but an area where I might actually agree with Representative Deaton and Representative Lewis is that I think odor is the primary reason why this legislation has been proposed. Like many things in agriculture, I acknowledge that there are smells associated with the work that we do. We are committed to addressing odor issues, and we frankly have already started investing in those odor mitigation issues in McDonald County. We're going to take further steps to this line. Acknowledging odor, I encourage the committee members to remember that the material that we haul from food plants has been tested and has been certified as safe. And I can show you every of the plants that we haul from. We have test results and a Missouri DNR letter that suggests that this material is safe and there is not toxic chemicals in the material. So to imply that we have been hauling in some flippant manner and not testing the material and not certifying it with the DNR under the rules that were set forward by the Missouri Fertilizer Control Board is just not fair. So the material is safe, but it does smell bad. And farmers who have joined us this morning can attest to its effectiveness as a fertilizer. So we believe the current version of the bill is overly burdensome for food producers and farmers in costly and unnecessary ways. We ask the committee to consider changes that we are proposing as an expert in this industry, but you don't have to take our word for it. We would welcome the chance to work with other states that are neighboring states, academics from places like the University of Arkansas, who we worked with to help frame the statute in the state of Arkansas, working with the Department of Ag and ADEQ. We would bring to bear those voices in a conversation about common sense regulation. Before I conclude, please let me just set the record straight on one more thing, and then I'll hand it over to the farmers. So in the corner here are two of my colleagues. I want you to know that at Denali, we aim to conduct ourselves in a top-notch way in Missouri. Chris Leathers and Mark Fisher are two of our operations managers. You guys can raise your hand so they recognize you. Chris and his operations team are based up in Macon. They are longtime community members that live in Missouri. They aim for excellence every day. And in addition to his team, Denali has a team of 25 environmental professionals with degrees in soil science, agronomy, crop science. That team is one that I manage. So we take very seriously our work every day to accomplish our company's purpose, which is to replenish the earth and not to harm it. So I grant that there are times in our operations where incidents occur. In agriculture, when you're running a farm or when you're hauling as much waste as we haul, incidents occur. But we at Denali, I'm here to say, want to learn from those incidents and make sure that they don't happen again. For example, a hose break or a rainstorm that wasn't forecasted that takes place. We're going to learn from that. We want to follow the rules. We are for common sense regulation. I'm not here to say anything other than that. But if we don't tweak this bill a little, it will lead to unnecessary overregulation. So thank you, Chairman Bean and committee members, for understanding the full scope of this issue before we push this legislation through. And we look forward to clear guidelines from the legislature and from the Missouri DNR so that agriculture and food production can continue to thrive in Missouri moving forward. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Senator Crawford.
So again, just to reiterate, the businesses that you represent, 11,000 jobs, any of those closed down because of your inability to operate at this point in time?
So they haven't closed yet, but the way this works, and I think everyone knows this, is if we can't apply our materials in a safe and common sense way on farmers' fields in Missouri, then we have to go somewhere else where we can. And if the DNR, for example, overregulates one nutrient, we're all for the DNR to regulate like crazy on pollutants, because our testing suggests, and the testing we submitted to the DNR, if you'd like I could pull out the letter, suggests there aren't pollutants in the material. But let's talk about phosphorus and nitrogen. If there's a high phosphorus area, we have to haul farther, our costs go up, we share those costs with the customer, and ultimately the price of chicken in the grocery store or at the chicken restaurant goes up because of this.
Well, I'm a little sensitive to, and probably unlike most of the people on this committee, I've had an issue in my own district that has been negatively affected, and 300 jobs in a very small town that I represent, those jobs are now on hold because of a similar issue to this one. So I'm a little bit sensitive, maybe sensitive to your side of the issue, put it that way, because what happens if your business goes away?
So if our business goes away, let me say it this way. Instead of getting into the nitty-gritty about wastewater treatment and some of the comments were made, but there is no place for this material to go. So another company like ours will have to come and haul and do so in a responsible manner. We would like that to be us, and we say we can. But I would be happy to work with the committee to find a way to give the DNR the guidelines so that this can be done in a common sense way. But there is no, like if Denali doesn't haul it, the plant has to shut down.
That was kind of what I was getting at, is somebody, it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, there is no magical place for this to go.
And there's also an economic, I mean, I'm as pro-ag as they come, but I'm also pro-business and kind of look at it from that side of the issue too. And hopefully we can find a happy medium where you can stay in business and provide a very needed service, and we won't harm the environment either. So I'm looking forward to hopefully that being the case.
Look forward to working with you, Senator. Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Carter?
Yes. Can you just speak to whether or not the Collingsworth Land Company lawsuit is it about smell?
The Collingsworth Land Company lawsuit, so that's not about smell, that's about runoff, and we're currently working very proactively with both sides. It's called a lawsuit is a little strong. We're currently working back and forward. Let me rephrase, because I don't mean to change your phrasing. The Collingsworth is a family, I think it's in McDonald County, is that correct? And we're working with them to test up on the hill versus testing down in the gully, where after a rain event, some material washed from the neighboring farm where we were land applying onto the Collingsworth property. We aim to clean that material up as quickly as possible. The Collingsworths have said, hey, let's do soil samples together, and we've agreed to that to try and figure out if there was any adverse effects from that effect. So we're working through, but it's not about odor. That's about their concern about the material that flowed onto their land, and we look forward to getting to the bottom of that
But
with
you
them.
specifically said that this was mostly brought about because of smell.
So
And I have a tendency to disagree.
I welcome that disagreement. What I was meaning to say was the language from Chairman Lewis or Representative Lewis and Representative Dean about the open basins. I believe that those basins are, they smell. And I believe that we should change the way Denali operates related to those basins. So we're in support of that legislation. It was permitted at the time. So the concept, I just take a little bit of issue with, now I'm talking about the basins, not your question, but I'll keep going on the basins just for a minute. Calling our activity unlawful or operating without a permit or no regulation, we were just following the rules that were in place, and they were low, and more rules and regulations are needed. But concentrating that amount of material in an open basin creates a tremendous amount of odor. So that portion of the bill that targets the open basins, I believe, is about odor, and I view that as the majority of the bill.
How many years have you been working in Southwest Missouri?
So our company has been working in Missouri for 25 years.
And for how long? Because I know specifically so I'm just going to speak to my district. There have been efforts to reach out to try to work with and to collaborate with concerns regarding the wastewater spread. And how many times have you reached out to work in tandem with the representative that represents that district that had concerns prior to this legislation being filed?
Yeah, so prior to the legislation being filed, I can't speak to how many times. I do know that I've reached out to Representative Deaton 5 times, but I've been able to get a meeting with him. But I did have a productive meeting with Representative Lewis. So regardless of the communication that may or may not have taken place historically, I think we're taking the right steps to get on a better path. That's what you and I have chatted about moving forward.
So a couple more questions. How many abatement orders or consents have you entered in with DNR?
Yeah, there were 4 that we've entered into recently. 2 more were warning letters. That's the answer to that question.
So I want to make the clear delineation between working with underneath the Fertilizer Control Board and working under DNR. Are you opposed to more regulation and testing?
No.
Okay. So then there's really not an issue with the bill.
There is an issue with the bill because of, so specifically, I know you all like to talk about the bill. So on page 4, chapter 644.041, section 2, there's this paragraph that says, and land application of industrial wastewater. I'll let y'all catch up. Thank you. I'll just wait one more minute. So it just,
Questions?
yeah, she's got one, they got one more question about what we should check. So this 644.041 section 2, this is just a paragraph that says, hey, the DNR should set rules. What we are experiencing, and maybe to the senator's question, as I am working with DNR to make those rules, and I know DNR's here in the room and they may testify too, it's the DNR is saying to me, we think, we guess, we interpret that this language suggests that we need to be super restrictive on phosphorus. And I just don't know that that's true. It might be true, but it also might not be true. And so if we need to address the odor of the basins, let's do that. If we need to test more and communicate better with your constituents, let's do that. These are all the things I've told you I'm for. But to put the industry out of business because the DNR has a wedge issue on phosphorus, for example, we would propose language that references something called a phosphorus index approach, which is a way that academics at University of Missouri, University of Iowa, Arkansas use to test the risk to the waters of the state, as opposed to the absolute concentration of phosphorus in a soil sample, which isn't actually a measure of risk to the environment. So if we can give the DNR some direction to not be anti this practice for the sake of being anti this practice, but find a way for it to be pro-business and pro-agriculture, we would be for that change. And that's where I think we need to change the legislation. Because it will force us further afield, and it'll have unintended consequences and drive costs way up.
I'm going to let
Further
others
questions?
have- yeah. You have-
Senator McCreary.
I was wondering who does your testing?
Yeah, so the testing is done by a third-party lab. The way I explain a third-party lab is it's a little bit like you getting your blood tested at the hospital. It might be done by LabCorp or a third party. You get back your cholesterol and your blood sugar. So we send this off to a lab. It happens to be in Arkansas. It's a lab that any environmental company would use to test the concentrations. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's certified, third party, and then we share those results without altering them. We don't have any say in this other than we pay the bill with the DNR before we start land applying a source, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions? Senator Carter?
Is there a third party, is there a chain of custody with the testing?
Is there a chain of custody with the testing? So, yes, we pull the sample, we put it in a jar, we mail it, and that's how it works.
So essentially, part of this language and also the concern from constituents, and people across the state is that you not be in charge of your own testing, that it actually is the third party that comes out to test, that chain of custody remains intact, and those reports are sent to the DNR and then sent to you as well.
Yeah, that's fine. If that's the way the rules are written, we will follow them.
Great.
I'm happy to say that we haul for plants that make food. This is not an issue. Like it's food related byproducts like you would have in your own kitchen. And if we change the way that the chain of custody is around testing, then that's just fine.
So then just last question, where do the coagulants go?
The coagulants, can you be more specific? I don't
Yeah,
understand.
the residues, the coagulants from the byproducts that you take from.
Yeah, so because this water treatment process you're getting in, I think, to dissolved air flotation, or DAF, which takes place at these food plants, use inputs into those systems to help treat the water, and those systems have been approved and regulated by the DNR. To suggest, by the way, that Tyson or Schreiber Foods or someone is operating a system that hasn't already been permitted and approved by the DNR, those inputs to the system are part of the way that the water is treated at these plants, and they are inert, they are non-toxic, and they are a part of the waste we haul. Yep.
Senator McCreary.
Sorry, you made me think of something. So one of the witnesses talked about after things dried out, after the leftovers of the leftovers dried out, that there was chicken bone grit left. So where did that come from? How did that end up on their property?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hold on just a second and I'll tell you. So the grit and the gullet and the other grits and sands that come out of the wastewater cleaning process. So I will answer questions. I know we're short on time in this hearing, but I will be here as long as it takes to get all your questions answered. And I think that will come back something that Senator Carter said, which is just a demand for information about how this works. But to suggest that ground up chicken bone was a part of this material, it may be part of washing down a food production plant at the end of the day. Also might be part of like sand that is on the boots of the people that work at the food production. It all goes down the pipe, goes to their little on-site wastewater plant, and then we haul it away. And we feed a lot of grit to chicken and turkeys. So this mealy material is part of the process, and that's where it came from. It also, but like to suggest that there's this would have been in the samples we submitted for testing before DNR gave us permission to apply in the state. So in our opinion, it's part of the agricultural process. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the witness?
Last one.
I'm going to have to go to another committee, so I'm going to ask Senator Crawford to please take over as chair. Please proceed.
So with I'm just trying to get some clarity on this. You're fine with testing, third-party testing, chain of custody.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
we spoke a couple weeks ago. It's
Yep.
been nearly 2 weeks.
Yep.
And agreed that you would allow testing of the basins.
Absolutely.
And that your lawyer was going to be in touch with the lawyer from the community.
That's right. Before we start testing the basins, we need to make sure that we know what we're testing for. Just like my example about cholesterol and blood sugar, like what are acceptable levels.
And I think that had already been kind of set out because there had been a request for testing, for third-party testing. So in my office, you said that you were fine with third-party testing.
Yep.
We would have that set up within 2 weeks. Thursday is 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And a lot of the concern, again, I think could be alleviated if you were fine with third-party testing with a chain of custody that was not, started by you. essentially.
Yes, I agree.
And so if you're okay with that, the biggest question is, why is that not happening?
Yeah, as we talked about in your office, what we need to do is hear from, there's lawyers involved and subpoenas, which make us just sort of feel like there may be ulterior motives. If we can get past what is the intent of the testing, we want to test nitrogen, we want to test phosphorus, we want to test arsenic, we want to test cadmium. None of these concentrations exist in toxic levels in the material we haul, or DNR wouldn't have allowed us to haul them in the first place. This is not a concern, but what we want to do is define those parameters and what we're testing
that's been
for.
regulating you. It was a fertilizer control board. And then why is there a lawsuit after you were moved under to be more regulated under the DNR after we took you underneath the fertilizer control board? I mean, that's the big question.
Two questions that you asked. I'll answer both of them. So when we were regulated for 25 years by the Fertilizer Control Board, Representative Deaton said in his testimony to the House Committee on a Natural Resource that he had to get a whiteboard out to figure out how it all fit together. So we would be asked to get a letter from the DNR, an exemption letter, so that we could be land applied as fertilizer. And we did that dutifully over the years.
And were there land application rates at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. They were based on nitrogen. They were based on what's called the plant available nitrogen rate. And then separately, I think your second part of the question was about testing. We just want to work with the people who are requesting the testing from your district to define what we're testing. And I haven't seen that proposal yet.
Have you been in contact with them?
Yes.
Because it was over the last 2 weeks?
Well,
Because
lawyers
I
talk to
have not-
lawyers. Yeah.
Yeah, our lawyers were saying they have not heard from you.
Okay, so have we been in contact with them? Yes. Do we need to follow up to define those parameters? Yes, but we're in the process of doing that like I told you we would do.
Okay, I look forward to hearing the confirmation of that because as of today, I've not heard.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get on that.
Further questions for this witness? Seeing none, next up in opposition. Thank you for your testimony.
So I'm going to hand it over to some of the farmers on whose farms we land apply. And the good news is that this, farmers, please talk about the material. But even if folks had to leave, this is recorded and they'll listen. So thank you.
Please be sure and state your name and be sure and fill out a witness form if you have not, and leave it on the desk, please.
My name's Jerry Evans. I farm in Newton County. Medium-sized farm. Cattle producer. I'm a nervous man here, okay?
We won't bite.
Okay, I've been told that, but I would like to, while we're right here on this subject with the basin, I'm a property owner that has a basin on my land. Okay. With Jill's comments here on, am I right, Jill? Miss Carter, whatever. Okay, I've known her for years, okay? Okay. With the process of doing the testing on this lagoon, in my belief, I think this lagoon needs to be stirred for at least 2 weeks before there's a test run in it, so that it is consistent. You're just not getting a top, dip down in there and get something off the top.
So, when it's spread.
When it's
Senator-
stirred, I want the lagoon stirred,
Okay.
where that it's mixed.
Senator Carter, do you have a question?
Yes, just briefly on the stirring. So when you test it, does it get stirred prior to testing?
Yes. Now, I've done my own test right here after it's been stirred and when it's in the process of being spread on my land.
Okay, appreciate it.
Okay, I'll leave these with you, leave that with you, leave this all up with you. Here's pictures of land application where I've used the setbacks from the roads and what have you that we do, the difference in what way it looks. These is all for you guys to keep. I would rather answer questions as to just testify, okay? Would you, are you guys
Well, we're down
all
to
right with that?
we're down to only 2 of us, so
That's fine. That is fine.
I don't have any questions at this time, Senator Carter, or anything. Okay. Thank you for your testimony. Next up in opposition.
I'm Danny Henderson. I live in southwest Missouri, Berry County, a small town down there. And I got a small cow-calf operation. I only own 400 acres. I've used this, they keep calling it sludge or something. I call it fertilizer. That's what I call it, because it does the job. And as far as the regulations, these people that come out and spread it for Denali, if they spread 40 acres, I might get 20 of it covered, because they stay back from the roads, the ditches. I even gripe about them, want them to get closer, and they won't do it. So if that tells you anything. And I've never had any bad effects on my cattle, my calves. I've got more grass than I ever had. And that means a lot when you're trying to make a living, you know, on cattle, because it's not easy. And it cuts down. Well, when I started doing this 3 years ago, of course, it all goes back to money on everybody, you know. Fertilizer is $900 plus a ton. Okay, these guys come out here and spread. Only had to use about a third fertilizer, and what they put on was 2/3. So you can see, it costs $90 an acre just putting 200 pounds of fertilizer on, commercial, and that doesn't do the job in the long run. It helps, but it doesn't really do it. But basically, that's all I do, and I have nothing negative to say about them. Everything's been great, as far as I'm concerned. And the smell's a little bad for a while, but if it rains a day or two, it's gone. And everything's got a little bit of negative. And I know this guy over here that's had all this runoff. Accidents happen. I mean, you know, if it rains 3 inches after he puts it on, it may run off everywhere. I don't know about what happened to him, but as far as I'm concerned, it works for me. And I'd hate to see it go away, because we can't get it right now. So I'm putting on commercial fertilizer at $500 and some a ton. Anyway, if you guys have any questions for me, I'll try to answer them for you.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Okay. Next up, not in favor.
My name's Steve Johnson. I live in southwest Missouri down in Newton County, and I've been applying this stuff from Denali for about 10 years. I own 160 acres and rent another 300. And without this product, my grass and my forage sales, I sell hay, it would suffer. I'm buying fertilizer just like everybody else, and I've got a load yesterday, and it was $9,000, and it's not going to go very far. Without this product, I don't have hay to sell, which is my livelihood. I taught school for 20 years. I was an ag teacher, and I was a poultry grower for 20 years also. And I've been DNR'd, so to speak. They've come out and they've regulated me, and I'm aware of the phosphorus. I take soil samples, and I stay away from the creeks and make sure there's enough grass filter to take care of that. We stay 50 to 75 feet from the landowners around me. I have had no problems or anybody saying anything bad against it, but the grass it produces is tremendous. My cows, I'm able to run more cows on a littler area of land than I could if I was applying commercial fertilizer, because my pockets just aren't that deep for fertilizer, and I'm looking for ways to cut my inputs. And I put some on ground that I farm, and I small grain farm some and grass, and I work it in the ground so that it's there, and we take care of the odor just as soon as possible. If they're applying and it's going on a ground that I'm going to say planting corn or wheat or soybeans or something like that, I will be out there with a disc disking it so that the smell goes away relatively fast. I have had all my soil tests. I watched my phosphorus. My phosphorus level was higher when I had turkey litter put on, and that I owned since I had turkey litter, and now it's worth something. And when I grew for years, it wasn't worth anything. I couldn't give the stuff away, and now I'm paying $36 a ton for it, plus having to spread it from somebody else. I like the product. I think that it's not the environmental hazard that it has been painted to be. If you watch what you're doing and you put it where it needs to be, it works. And I will say Denali has done their part. We go out and flag and make sure that we have little survey flags we stick out that, hey, this is 50, 60 feet from the road or my next door neighbor landowner. And you can see a marked difference in the difference in the grass and the color and the amount that it produces. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm aware of the environment. You don't teach school and teach ag for 20 years and not do it, So any questions from the committee? I thank you for letting us come today and talk.
Any questions for the witness?
Just a
Senator Carter?
quick question. Is there a fear that the desire is to get rid of this, or because I want to be clear that I don't think we have a farm, we have a cattle farm also, we were turkey farmers, so the goal, I don't think of anybody in this committee or in the legislature, is to make sure that farmers don't have access to.
I think the regulations are great, and we need to be. It seems like I was regulated with my litter on my turkeys.
Right.
I could only put so much on. Phosphorus levels, there's some fields that the phosphorus levels are really high, and we live in a high phosphorus area. Nitrogen, I can put too much nitrogen on and cause my neighbor problems just by putting on liquid nitrogen, the runoff. So, we as farmers are very conscientious of our neighbors and what it takes to grow grass. I don't want to over-apply. I can't afford it.
Right.
I don't want them to over-apply because it might kill the grass.
Well, I just want to reassure you that the goal is not with these regulations, is just to ensure the same things that you are wanting, is to protect your farmland, that those things are in place so that we do that. If we are regulating manure and CAFOs, then we just want to make sure that this third avenue of nitrogen content is also regulated and made safe.
Yes.
So thank you.
I agree, 100%. Thank you.
That a couple years ago, $900 a ton urea is pretty tough, isn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I got a semi-load yesterday. That's why didn't get up here till midnight last night. And one was delivered yesterday, and it was $9,000. And that's just the second load, and I need 2 or 3 more. And
We fight phosphorus levels in the boot hill as well. It's a tricky little,
Yes.
phosphorus is tricky. So.
Yes, it is. It is.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, not in favor of these House bills. Seeing.
Oh, we got 2 more,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
Please proceed, Senator Crawford. I'm going to have to ask you again. They've called me back up there.
Yeah, my name is John Holloway. Am I on here?
You're on. Go ahead.
Okay. John Holloway from down there in southwest Missouri, Berry County. But I'm here representing myself. I'm not here for Denali or the government or anyone else. But I just have got several questions I've always wanted to get answered. It seems like all the commercial fertilizer places are against these people spreading this water. A lot of people call it sludge. I think it's water. Now, I done research talking to my neighbors and everybody else for 3, 4, maybe 5 years because I'm a skeptical type person. I don't go off of what hearsay. You know what I'm saying? I do research on about everything that involves my life. But I got to looking around and doing a lot of investigating, just on my own. And then I got to noticing my grass and my wheat field against the neighbors that had put this water on their places. So I thought, and I went about another year or so before I tried it. But I've never had a bit of trouble with it. It does come and make an odor for a little while, but other than that, it's not too much. But my I kind of find it funny that when all this stuff come out, it's always about the smell. Then after the DNR or whatever come out and would test the air and everything, and it would be in regulations. You know what I mean? I mean, the tolerance level for not being the air being polluted. Then after that didn't seem to go over too good, then it started getting there where everybody's complaining about the runoff water. But now as far as them people that spread it, Denali, Senegro, and all them, anything is possible to happen if it rains real hard. But they've never, of all of my land that they've put it on for the last 3 or 4 years, I've never had a bit of problem with this water going out of its boundaries on my property because they applied it like it's supposed to have been applied. But now I'm sure that everybody's got a few faults except me, I mean, just the way it is. But I'm sure that there's a few things that some of them the companies need to do and correct, but I don't think they need to be discriminated against and shut down. See what I'm saying? It seems to me like it's just discrimination against them. Everybody's got all these negative effects, but I still yet hadn't heard of any evidence yet except somebody had a bone come down his yard or, off the hill. And I can understand that because I have anything that you eat or drink have probably been involved with it, like milk. And I've had the first organic chicken laying operation in the state of Missouri. And I've had poultry, turkeys. When I was a kid, we had hogs, milk cows, and beef, and I still run beef cows. But I can probably have an explanation for that bone washing off down on his property because whenever I was in the poultry business, I had a stacking shed, and you would compost your litter. Well, here would come coyotes, buzzards, and in the right season it'd be eagles, and they'd be dragging them bones off out in the field. So that could be, instead of being, I never did ever see of anything that come out of their water that they spread on me that would even look like a chicken bone. And I haven't, and because trust me, I'm skeptical. I have went over all of my land. I guess trying to look for a flaw, but I never could find a flaw, except the only thing that I could see is whenever that water dried, my grass just went out of sight, just absolutely growed good. And it's not because they give it to me, because I can definitely afford fertilizer. It's just a good product. You spread your turkey litter, your chicken litter. It takes a long time before you see a result of it. Now this water, you'd have results quick. And I guess that's about all I got to say.
Questions for this witness? Senator Carter.
Again, I just want to reiterate, is there something in this bill that you think will shut them down?
Well, it's just kind of, everybody's trying to say there's all kinds of foreign products in there like that shouldn't be there. And I don't know what it is, because I've never seen nothing out of place anytime they spread on one of my places.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think the goal with testing, which is in the bill, will just reassure and alleviate a lot of those concerns. And the goal is to continue to be able to use this. So nothing in here,
Right.
I don't think, is with the intent of shutting this down.
Okay,
So-
well that's fine. But I didn't mean to be derogatory about it. But I kind of feel like these people spreading this water. Now you've got these multi-billion-dollar companies, you know, Tyson's, Georgia's, on and on and on. I don't think that they would even take a chance of getting rid of that water, but just because of the heavy fines and stuff like that go with it. Them people's got enough money to do it right, wouldn't you think? They don't have to cut no corners. So, and I don't think that anyone within their boundaries or smaller management would even take a chance of overlooking something because of job protection, you know what I'm saying? So I believe that when it gets down to these people that's hauling this water off, like Denali and whoever, they're just going in there getting that water, thinking that it is probably already good, even though they do take a test on it themselves. Because every time I spread water, I definitely wanted the results of the test of it, and I never had a problem getting it. So,
Thank you for your testimony.
my,
Next up in opposition.
Last one. Watch your step, Lou.
My name is Lou Titchener Metlock, and I'm here just speaking for our farm. It's about a 600-acre farm my mom and dad managed to put together. My dad's 88 years old. My mom's gone. My dad wanted you to know that his farm has never looked better. That's what he wants you to know. We would be in a bad way if it wasn't for this. And I feel like that a lot of opposition to this is just money. Think of the fertilizer plants. It's going to lose a little money if we don't go buy their high-dollar fertilizer, and we found an alternative. Good for the farmers. We finally cut a break here. And farmers are not going to do something to their land to lose money. Trust me, we're not, because we can't afford it. We don't live high on the hog. We're always looking to manage money. This has helped immensely. And these people have very concerned about putting it on our property. Soil testing, watching what they're doing, checking it, looking at it. And we would never put anything on the land that wouldn't make a crop grow. And like the people talked about, you can see where they stay away from the fences. Yeah, I'm another one. Get over it a little more, because there's this much difference in the crop from where it's not and where it is. I mean, you can tell it's good stuff. Addressing the young man that spoke about water wells. My parents is in the water well drilling business for 50 years. DNR regulates that. If you've got a state-approved cased well like you're supposed to, you'll never be drinking surface water. If you don't have regulated well, you're going to be drinking surface water, whether it's a cow, a chicken, a pig, or a dog pen. You're going to drink surface water. So we're not contaminating wells. There's nothing contaminating wells. I don't know about runoff. I see lagoons, city lagoons putting human waste out on people's pastures. That bothers me. But anyways, we're just not going to allow. My dad put his 600 acres in a trust that can never be sold. It will always stay in the family. We would never endanger future generations. You're not a farmer because you're out for the big bucks. You love the land. You're never going to do anything wrong to it.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in opposition.
One more to address testing, if you want to hear that witness.
Quickly.
Quick, Chris.
Thank you for your time. My name is Chris Leathers. I've been working with Denali for 21 years as an area manager. And I just want to address the testing. So I've tested it, and we sent it to a third-party lab. I've also, we'll send, or the plants themselves will send tests. We will never touch it straight from the plant to the lab. So I've done both just to verify that the plant, wasn't modifying the samples or anything as well. And as far as our land application, we always test the soil, get the results back to make sure that the soil pH is correct for us to be able to land apply on it for the farmer, and any other, and check for any metals that we have previous put on in the prior to that as well. So just wanted to say something on this soil, or the testing that we did have. We don't always, or we have verification that we haven't modified any test if there's any skepticism on that side.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions for this witness?
Just a comment.
Senator Carter.
So I appreciate your willingness to test and ensure that it's safe for your internal purposes. I think what this bill does is also allow that third-party chain of custody to ensure that the farmers also know and the communities also know that everything's fine. So it should eliminate a lot of this concern.
Yep.
So that's what this legislation does. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, in opposition. Seeing none, anyone here for informational purposes only?
Good morning, Chairman Crawford and member of the committee. TJ Graven here testifying for informational purposes. I know we're short on time. Just wanted to make myself available for questions that the committee might have. Both sides of the argument have been covered thoroughly so far. Like I said, if you have any questions, be happy to answer them.
Questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you, TJ.
Thank you.
Next up, for informational purposes only. Seeing none, this will conclude the hearing on House Bills 20. Okay. Just a reminder, be sure and fill out a witness form and leave it on the desk. Thank you.
This on?
Yes, sir.
My name's Jim Bard. I'm from Southwest Missouri. And I've been concerned about this since about 2018. One of the first incidents that I got involved with was Denali employees. I was told that they was spreading in the rain, so I had to go witness it myself. I don't take a lot of people's words for it. So I did. I went and looked for myself, and sure enough, I thought I would go down to my farm down there in McDonald County, because I live in Newton County. And I had taken my dump truck with me. I thought, well, if it's not raining down there, I'll do some work down there. But it was raining, so I thought, well, I'll swing back around. And so I was videoing of these two sludge spreaders out there in this field. In fact, the person that had it spread said he'd never had it done again. He said, I never had so many weeds come up in all my life. So I videoed, and I drove down there. I thought, well, I'm going to go on down the road. So this guy that come out from behind this tanker there, and he was videoing me. So I pulled up there. Hey, what are you doing? He said. I said, well, you guys are not supposed to be spreading in the rain. Oh, you so-and-so. He said, you ain't got no business. I said, I'm out here on County Road. And I said, I can be out here all I want. So he said, well, why don't you just step down out of that truck and we'll just settle this right now. I said, I don't have no beef with you. I said, in fact, after a statement like that, I'm going to call a sheriff. And I did. I backed up, called the sheriff. He come out. They filed a report. Now, isn't that really good of a company that says they're trying to do the best they can? No, they're not doing the best they can. But anyway, if you'll Google Denali, Synagro, they have had so many lawsuits filed against them. Some Texas farmers down there has got suits filed against them for spreading sludge down there that's got cancer growths on their cattle. And what I'm concerned about, I'm not concerned about the fertilizer really as much as I'm concerned about the water, because that's what we're here for today. I don't want contaminated water. And the gentle lady here had talked earlier. She had said, how come this to be noticed in Missouri? Why is this, you made that statement similar. Well, the reason being is because we have lax regulations, and states that's northeast of us, the state of Maine has totally shut down all land application. Now, you can put on commercial fertilizer, but you can't put on anything else because they got too much PFAS and PFOS in it. So is that in our water? They don't test for that. They can say all day that it's not in there. So the other thing is, are they going to cherry pick their samples? I've got samples here of what's good and bad. And, are you going to say that, you got a high number of ammonia? Chloride? They don't put chloride in commercial fertilizer. You kill everything. It's just kind of like phototoxicity. They're spreading this all over now. It kills the grass for a while. Granted, it'll come back. Maybe. But I know there's just one farm down there that they spread it by us, and it's not Denali, it's Bubs Inc. And there's 19 companies in the state of Missouri that's allowed to spread this stuff. And I understand the gentle lady's concerned about jobs. But if we don't have water to drink, what do we need the jobs for? Plain and simple. If there's no water to drink, we don't need the jobs. I'm going to be alive. And that's my concern. Now then, the wells, since December the 14th, I turned in 2 wells that was being spread too close to. They had the DNR guidelines that was put out that said 300 feet. Well, the gentleman came out. Oh, it's just 200. He said, what, just 242 feet? I said, why do you write 300 feet down if it's just 242? Are we either going to go by the regulations or we're not? And it's like keeping cattle off of it for 14 days. They don't do that. They spread it and spread it and spread it. Down on this one farm down there, and this is Bubs Inc., there's 6 wells that he spread too close to, and one of those 6 was a pitcher pump well. So it was probably pretty shallow looking at it. Now, I didn't get on the person's property. I was able to take a picture. DNR come out and investigated every one of these incidents. Now, I haven't went back to see online if they've been filed yet, but I'm sure they have. And there's been a lot of talk about the smell. I'm a private pilot. I fly fixed-wing aircraft, and I also fly a powered parachute. I can fly over anything I want to up there real slow. And about a month ago, the wife and I said, let's go flying. Okay, so we get up there about 2,000 feet, flying around. And the only thing that I could smell up there was 2 things. I could smell fresh air. And this putrid smell that they spread on the ground, I didn't smell any chicken litter. I didn't smell any cow manure. I didn't smell any of that stuff other than that rancid smell that they're spreading on this property down there. And they have spread it the whole month of December, the whole month of January, the whole month of February, and up to March. They spread on it. Now that place has got to be saturated. Now then, we've
And I'm
got
gonna
one
need to,
earth.
I'm going to need to interrupt you for a second. We've got another committee that needs this
Okay.
room, so we're going to need
One-
to wrap it up.
One thing.
Thank you.
We got one earth, and the earth is just like a sponge. When it gets saturated, it's not going to absorb anymore. And one other thing, we've had supposedly 23 million people enter our country. Those 23 million people are going to generate to be 100 million people. Now then, where are we going to put all this stuff at if we don't get some regulations in place beforehand to get this to so that we can handle this? We're not going to be able to handle it if we don't. But the water is my main concern. Clear, clean drinking water. And that's what these regulations should pertain to.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, anyone else for informational purposes only? Seeing none, this will conclude the hearing on House Bills 2134 and 1956. No other business coming before the committee at this time. I make a motion that we adjourn. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.